Sagely Demonologist sent me a link to a video criticizing my video, Religious Nihilism, by Esoteric Entity. I'm going to skip the beginning because he just plays me saying that I hope for a time when we choose as a species to give up our beliefs in ancient myths and fables and embrace reality, followed by the meme of a ridiculous atheist screaming at a street preacher.
As retaliation for the collective crime of racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and homophobia.
Now, I'm not sure why he bothered. It's a stale meme that has nothing to do with what I was saying in that video. In fact, it has absolutely no relevance, and if I saw someone acting that badly in public, I'd likely tell them to knock it off. Obviously, this guy doesn't represent atheists, and the vast majority of atheists don't act like that. Talking about religion and atheism on a YouTube channel, or article, or blog post, etc., isn't the same as screaming at someone in the middle of the street. Anyhow, let's move on to the meat of his argument.
Hey everyone, ever notice how when a community which represents an idea that was once considered to be revolutionary or controversial finds themselves and what they once stood for in mainstream acceptance, they don't tend to disperse and move on like most would logically expect them to do. Instead, they start exaggerating, making mountains out of molehills, or just downright making shit up in order to manufacture controversy so they can remain relevant and still pretend to be warriors of the counterculture.
Okay, so I'm no warrior of any counterculture. I'm not waving a Kekistani flag or battling those evil blue-haired feminists. I honestly don't give a flying crap about your perceived culture war, and I certainly don't want to be conscripted into your army. Here's what I do, Esoteric Entity. I talk about what interests me. I don't talk about something to remain relevant or to reach some sort of relevancy in your eyes. I talk about what I think is important, what I find interesting, and what I find relevant to me. Second, while you think atheism has reached acceptance in mainstream culture, you don't get the emails that I do. Some from teenagers who are having a hard time being accepted into their families, simply because they're atheists. You don't get hate mail from parents saying that by merely listening to my point of view, their child has become a black hole of despair. You're also woefully misinformed if you think atheists around the world are accepted. You're either living under a rock or you spend way too much time on the internet, and you've fooled yourself into thinking YouTube represents the entire world. Newsflash, it doesn't. Children are still being taught they deserve a lake of fire. Creationism is still being taught to children. People are still being taught that atheists need to die or deserve death. Most of the people in the world still believe in ancient stories full of really, really bad ideas, and those ideas continue to affect politics and public policy around the world.
Well, that is exactly what has happened to the leftovers from the first phase of the culture war, aka atheism versus creationism.
Thankfully, I'm not a leftover then. I wasn't making videos back then. I'm making videos now about a subject I find interesting. I do love that you have this culture war set up into phases, like you're some sort of general or something. That's adorable. But it's like you think that because you say the first phase is over, people just threw down their Bibles, Korans, and other holy books, and just stopped basing their lives around harmful Iron Age nonsense. It's like you're oblivious to the world around you. Like you don't see the hundreds of terrorist attacks and the thousands of deaths those attacks cause. It's like you don't read about women being burned as witches or any of the other horrors that religion convinces people to partake in around the world, day after day, month after month. Are there other harmful ideologies? Of course, but I can't cover them all, and I barely have time to cover this topic. So I decided to focus on the one subject I didn't see many people talking about anymore. And the one subject I found more interesting and more important than the rest. Religion.
Atheism won the culture war. The political influence of the evangelists has dwindled to irrelevance, and now, because atheists have absolutely nothing to bitch about in politics...
Are you seriously going to tell me that religion doesn't affect public policies around the world? You're really going to stand there and pretend like even in the United States, evangelicals don't form a voting bloc that politicians often cater to? Even here in Canada, 3 provinces, one of which I live in, publicly funds Catholic schools. No other faith group has schools partially funded from the public purse, but somehow we still fund Catholic schools in 2017, using taxpayer money, including my own. All around the world, religion and religious beliefs play a key role in how people act, how people treat each other, and how public policy is shaped. If you think YouTube atheists somehow changed that during your supposed first phase of the culture war, you're out of your goddamn freaking mind. I'm not saying their efforts were useless, and I don't blame some of them for moving on to other topics, But that doesn't mean there is nothing to discuss here, and no reason for others to continue pointing out the unbelievable harm that religion continues to inflict on our species and the world we live in.
But still like the attention of being a public figure piled on with the victim status of being an oppressed minority, you get situations like this, where in response to Voltaire Bastiat claiming that atheism is misled because getting rid of religion won't solve anything because dogma is the problem, which I absolutely agree with because there are many institutions far more dangerous than any religion that function just like a religion and have killed far more than any religion could ever conceive of.
What kind of armchair psychologist babble was that? My goal isn't to become a public figure, and I certainly don't talk about my victim status. You don't know me at all, yet you think you know what motivates me to talk about religion and its influence on the world. Second, that is some crazy logic you use there at the end. It boils down to, there's worse ideologies and institutions, so let's ignore this one. Murder is worse than assault, so let's not talk about assault. It's not relevant enough. See how stupid that sounds? Oh wait, I forgot. We can only talk about what you deem to be the most relevant topics in your culture war.
Godless Cranium here goes on a cringe-worthy rant where he equates atheism to a fucking civil rights movement and basically says, well, you disagree with me, so you agree with oppression.
What are you even talking about? Thanks for completely missing the point of that video. I honestly don't even know how you could get it so wrong. I used the MLK clip because Voltaire's point was that utopian or ideal thinking was the main problem. I could have used music or architecture to get my point across, but what I was trying to show is that idealism isn't always a bad thing. MLK and every other social movement leader, or great musician, or great architect, or painter, has likely used utopian thinking. I used MLK because he says straight out that he has a dream. I mean, you can't illustrate utopian thinking much clearer than that. Yet you somehow pulled from that I was accusing Voltaire of agreeing with oppression. And I wasn't saying that atheism is a civil rights movement either. That wasn't at all what I was trying to get across with that video. Although it's fascinating to see someone misunderstand my message so profoundly. Like, it wasn't even close. If you're a general in the culture war army, get ready to lose a lot of battles, my friend.
You know, this sounds strikingly familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it. What other group of people once had a political movement which was somewhat countercultural and fought against cultural discrimination, won the fight, and now resorts to manufacturing reasons to exist because their goals were achieved years ago and they no longer have any reason to exist naturally?
Women worldwide do need feminism. That doesn't mean I agree with every feminist, and I think that a good many of them are harmful to feminism overall. But to pretend that women are treated equally worldwide is unbelievably false and demonstrably so. And guess what's partially to blame for that inequality? Religion. Now, honestly, I don't really want to talk about feminism. I'll leave that to people like you, the relevant culture warriors.
And the similarities don't end there. Much like feminists and Black Lives Matter redefining what it means for someone to be racist or sexist, atheist political organizations such as the American Atheists have redefined what it means to be an atheist and have changed what it means to be an atheist into what it really is, just an agnostic.
I don't care for this conversation either. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't see any reason to believe in God, any more than I see a reason to believe in a lazy-eyed, invisible pink dragon. More importantly, I'm an anti-theist. I think religion isn't true and would rather we base policies, institutions, moral structures, etc. on reality. I think religion does demonstrable harm to people around the world, but overall I think it's not true, and that's my main reason for opposing it.
Which leads me to my main point, and what about the Godless Cranium video inspired me to make this rant.
It's about time.
But first, I feel I should address this point because it's not just something atheist political organizations use as a talking point, but a lot of people previously mentioned clinging to relevance as well, such as The Amazing Atheist or Cult of Dusty.
Relevance is subjective. From a pure numbers perspective, both Cult of Dusty and The Amazing Atheist are miles ahead of someone like you in terms of views, subs, likes, shares, and all the things many people take into account when determining relevance. But even if only one person views your video and took away something of value, that might mean for that bit of time, your content was more relevant and useful to that person than any of my videos will ever be. In other words, your content will seem more relevant to some people and mine to others. I personally try not to think about it too much. I just make videos I want to make and hope people like them.
The distinction between not believing in God and, as they put it, the lack of belief in a God is an argument which is purely based on semantics and really illustrates to me just how petty these pretend intellectuals are.
I don't necessarily think it's petty. I think people are trying to explain their position. I've been in enough of those conversations that I realized in my world, it doesn't matter. If someone labels themselves an agnostic, I'd rather just ask them why they hold that position, considering there is no good reason or evidence to believe in a God. I just skip the whole semantic part and jump ahead to the main course, because that's the part that really interests me.
To not believe in a God is absolutely no different than to lack in belief, because in both positions you are arguing the exact same thing. This is important to note because atheists have redefined what it means to be an atheist in response to criticism drawn onto their ideas. That it's equally as unscientific and irrational to declare that there is no God, because you have no evidence either way.
It's like you took a course in apologizing for religion 101. Like my invisible lazy-eyed pink dragon example earlier, you can't prove that my dragon doesn't exist, but I have a funny feeling you would have no problem saying you don't believe in it. And rightfully so, I might add. I feel the same about God. And to say the chances of, say, the Christian God existing and not existing is 50-50 is absurd. Religions that come with holy books can be falsified, and they routinely are, which forces religious people to eventually reinterpret their holy texts or make excuses for what their books actually say. You also don't have to be completely sure about something to hold a position. I know riding that fence is much easier. However, I'm not 100% sure about anything really, but that doesn't prevent me from taking a position based on the available evidence.
And atheists are empiricists without rationalism. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I just want to make my position on the issue really clear before I start getting into the meat of this so that no one can attempt to assassinate my character as being a religious nut or whatever. I think it should be pretty obvious that I'm not a religious nut at this point, considering that I just explained the problem with the religious point of view, but I've never really mentioned it on the channel before in depth.
Let me guess. Fence-riding agnostic? Your nonsense about both positions being equally plausible made that pretty clear the last clip.
I'm an agnostic.
Color me shocked.
Which is essentially the only reasonable and scientific point of view that one can take, because it's a point of view which encompasses both logic and science. Because you cannot prove something either way, the only thing you can do is default. Because to take a positive position on either side of a debate which centers around something that's unfalsifiable is ignorant and rejects the scientific method in favor of ideology.
Yeah, it's the weak position. It's incredibly weak in my opinion. Take the time to examine the case for and against God and take a position. But thanks for demonstrating why we need more people talking about this subject, and challenging the notion that you need certainty to hold a position, and or that holding an agnostic position is some sort of intellectually superior position than that of theism or atheism. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks to those who watched. Take care and cheers.